ma'am. It hasn't started recording. Yes, ma'am. Now
Okay. Okay. The first and the foremost thing is that I must thank the organizing team, students and teachers, both of RLA, for giving this opportunity to share my work, my thoughts on romantic age. Now, very often we think that romantic age is boring, is irritating. It is something about Wordsworth and old men writing about nature and trees. That's not true. One of the things that we all tend to forget is when I ask you, who are you? And you start your sentence that I am a girl, I am a boy, I am a student, or I am a human being, I am a non-binary, or I am a heterosexual, or I am an Indian, I am an atheist. We always start our sentences with I, right? Now, which means that you think yourself worthy of considering yourself as a subject. Now, this very idea where you're writing I with a capital I, where you think yourself that you're important, where you're not talking about God, the divinity, you're not talking about any kind of philosophical tradition, but you're talking about yourself, I with a capital. This entire way of thinking, we owe it to the Romantic age. Prior to this age, we did not see ourselves important enough to start our sentences as I am and then ... Are you getting my point? So Romantic age therefore is important because it is unprecedented. It is something that does a lot of philosophically, conceptually, it changes the ways in which we perceive ourselves. And today when we are talking about the Romantic age, this is roughly the time 1798 to 1832. We will talk about historical changes, but more importantly, what are the key ideas that make a certain text romantic? So when you say Wordsworth is a romantic poet, Mary Shelley is a romantic author, novelist, Blake is similar, Blake is pre-romantic, whereas Blake and Wordsworth, the age difference is huge. Browning is more or less contemporary, but you would say that Browning is Victorian and not romantic. What are the characteristics that make certain authors and certain writers as romantic as opposed to others? Now, chronologically, this is what we follow. 1785, you have the age of sensibility. You should visually do it in terms of a blackboard. This part is 1785, you have the age of sensibility. You have the man of feeling. Then you have the French Revolution. French Revolution is completely changes the ways in which you think. Then you have 1798, the publication of lyrical ballads. 1798, the preface is considered to be the manifesto of the Romantic age. Then you have 1832, the death of Walter Scott. Now, that is considered to be more or less when the Romanticism fades away. 1832, reform bills comes in, and then eventually you have what is Victorian. Now, something that you will remember and you need to understand and remind yourselves, Romantic age, Victorian age, chronologically, historically are more or less overlapping. It is only in terms of their intellectual, literary sensibilities that they are different. Not so much in terms of the historical age when the texts are written. Now, what is Romanticism? Romanticism is something, the literary and philosophical engagement that comes immediately after the Enlightenment. Enlightenment is the Augustan age, the neoclassical age. Now, one important definition of what is Enlightenment is what Kant gives us. Those of you who are students of literature, you would know Kant writes this fascinating essay, What is Enlightenment? He's saying that enlightenment is a process of man's liberation from bondage and oppression through the faculty of reason. So it is the rational man, reason, order that becomes important. Romanticism inverts everything that we know as enlightenment. I hope you are making sense of what I'm speaking. So What Romanticism does is, as opposed to reason and intellect, Romanticism says that no, it is not reason and intellect that are important. It is what you feel, what you think that is important. This is what is called subjective emotions. Against order and meter, Romanticism says it is your spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions. This is a Wordsworthian quote, spontaneity. As opposed to everything that Enlightenment teaches us. You must write in a particular meter, you must follow a particular pattern of writing. There is a way by which you must eat, there is a way by which you must, dining habits, everything Enlightenment was a coded order. Romanticism, think about P.B. Shelley, Byron, Mary Shelley, everyone. They did not believe that this is true. They did not believe that society has to follow rules. It was a completely revolutionary energy that defined what is Romanticism. Now, today what we are going to try to make sense of is from 1798, what starts as Romanticism and how it leads to Shelley's, declaration. He has that famous declaration that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. How do we trace that trajectory of moving from Wordsworth to Shelley? What are the ways by which suddenly this revolutionary ideas, man is important. You have this famous figure called Prometheus. Prometheus keeps coming in, Frankenstein, keeps coming in P.B. Shelley's writing. You have Prometheus Unbound. You have the Faustian man. You have everything almost as if, I am so important, I don't care what you think. How does it usher in newer forms of writing and thinking? Now, the other thing that I also wanted to alert you to is that Romanticism is not just an age of literary output. It was also something that completely changed the ways in which visual art worked, visual art. So you have paintings, drawings, sketches, architecture, sculpture, everything. And in bits and pieces, I'll try to bring in visual art just to visually help you understand the difference between Enlightenment and Romanticism. So, this is a chart that I always tell my students, learn it by heart. You will need it. This is a table that you must close your eyes and you'll be able to see it. You have two columns, Enlightenment and Romanticism. If I had a blackboard, then I would put Victorian right next to it. Enlightenment, Romanticism, and then Victorian. But as of now, this is what I have, Enlightenment and Romanticism. Please say yes or no so that I know that I am not alone here.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Enlightenment and Romanticism. Now, Enlightenment is the rational man. So, man who is in emphasis is only on intellect, practicality, the pragmatic man. The emphasis is so much on order and formula and the tradition of writing, the reason, that one of the most important books of Enlightenment is Dictionary, that is written by Samuel Johnson. Now, dictionary, if you know, dictionary is nothing but ordering of words in terms of their meaning. The order has to be strict. The only way in which you can understand and approach a dictionary is by following the order. You follow the alphabetical order. And that is quintessential about Enlightenment, that you follow order, you follow one after the sequence, the idea of sequence, linearity. And it has to follow logic, it has to follow reason, it has to be something that is rationally deductive, one form of scientific reasoning. The term was deductive reasoning. Something changes when we arrive at 1798, towards the 1790s, you have the Romanticism. As opposed to intellect, you will have imagination. Imagination, whenever we use the term for Romanticism, it will always be in capital I. Imagination. And there are different ways by which Romantic poets define imagination. Hopefully, we'll go into the definition of primary imagination, secondary imagination, Wordsworthian definition, Shelley's definition, all the kinds of different ways by which we understand and make sense of imagination. You have Keats also. But the key idea is the same. It is your imagination, your mental faculty that enables you to perceive the world. One example that I always use in the class is you go out, you see right out of your classroom, and you usually the university classrooms have windows, big windows. You see out of the window, and what do you see? Now, some students see the sky. There would be others who would see, oh, there are crows. There would be others who would see trees, and there would be others who would see their classmates loitering into the canteen. And there would be others who would see nothing. Oh, it's just a bored look. Is the outside external reality in any way different? Yes or no?
External reality. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Is the external reality different? I mean, are the trees moving? So you see out of the window and I see out of the window. Is the tree moving, or
But
is the tree right there?
individual perceives reality differently.
Good. External reality is not different. It is your individual perception of that reality which is different, right?
Right, ma'am.
So it is the ways in which your mind perceives that external reality as opposed to my mind perceives that external reality that defines what is real for you and me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That is what is romanticism. So when you say that Wordsworth is a nature poet, it is very different from saying that Wordsworth is drawing for us that nature. That is exactly how romanticism is different from, say, the Platonic idea. You have Plato, who is saying that the world, the external reality, is always a reflection, an imitation of the form, the ideal world. This external reality, according to Plato, is always twice removed from the ideal world. Now, Wordsworth, and I'm just using Wordsworth, but romantics, it comes to visual artists, it would be for poets, it will be for novelists, it will be also for essays. You have all these fascinating essays that were written. Romantics say that no, it is not a world out there, the external reality out there, that is twice removed from the ideal world. In fact, you and I don't know what is the ideal world. It is not available to us. All that is available to you and me is the external world, the world that is out there. And when you and I decide to write a poem or to draw a painting, to paint that tree out there, or the snow out there, or animals out there, you are not doing a reflection, a representation meaning re dash and then presenting again, representing again, a representation of an ideal reality that is out there. No. Romantics say that what you're doing is you're expressing your spontaneous feelings of how you perceived that external reality. It is your own subjective emotions that appears in your art, and it can be any kind of art. And there are different ways by which different categories by which we understand uh, this romantic fervor, this romantic zeal to represent. One of the categories, an important idea, is sublime, and I'll go into greater details into what is sublime. The next important difference between romanticism as opposed to intellect as opposed to enlightenment is, in enlightenment assumes that it is a rationality that is important. So if you and I are rational, if you and I are capable of reason, then you and I should arrive at the same conclusion. Hence, it is called the deductive reasoning, as I said. Romanticism, on the other hand, emphasizes on capital I, the individual. Nature does not affect you and me in the same way? You and I, when we try to write a poem about a tree, the same tree, you and I will arrive at different sentences about that tree. And therefore, as opposed to a dictionary, the sequence, the ordering of words that is a quintessential Enlightenment text, it is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley that is a quintessential romantic text. And this is very, very important because, we tend to forget that romanticism is also something that is gloomy and dark. It's not always happy emotions. And we'll go into the greater details about it. But Frankenstein is something that captures all these different ways by which we understand romanticism. Now, the key ideas that I want today to highlight are the intellectual impulses of this age. What are the different ways by which poets and poetry convey authentic human feelings? Now, as opposed to say the idea of Platonic representation, it is the expressive mind of the poet that becomes the center stage of romanticism, who use, I'm quoting, the ordinary language of conversation. It is very important for romantics to use the ordinary language of conversation, the lower forms of diction, and each of these are ways by which, so you can talk about the visual art, you can talk about literature, but all of these are ways by which the poet will try to propose aesthetic experience as the heart of any kind of conceptual framework. It is beauty and delight and all these ideas that will become the defining feature of this age, as opposed to say Pope and Augustan tradition of writing where you have meter form of writing. So whether you're writing in a mock epic satire or whether you're writing in a what kind of form you're writing, that becomes important in Pope and Augustan age, as opposed to this, what you're feeling, how is your audience affected by those feelings, that becomes important. The aesthetic experience becomes important in romanticism. And this is something that I will keep repeating again and again because this is what is the defining feature of romantic age. There's a beautiful quote of Keats. He says that, the genius of poetry must work out its own salvation in a man. It cannot be matured by law and precept, but by sensation and watchfulness in itself. That which is creative must create itself. Now, the keywords, anyone can tell me what is the keyword here? Or what are the keywords here?
The keywords must be if one writer or poet try to write something, he have to perceive the world the way he sees, rather than the other tell him to see that way or this way.
Yes,
Ma'am,
but
are
what
you
are
asking for the keywords in the context of this quote?
yes. So tell me
The
the keywords. Give me three words
salvation,
from here. Give me three words from here.
salvation,
Quickly.
sensation, and watchfulness.
Good. Salvation. Think about man's
And
salvation.
creativity.
You are going to sit down and meditate. His Pope Keats is saying that's nonsense. You don't have to meditate. Man's salvation is there in A, sensation, B, watchfulness, and C, creative tendencies of his life. So that is what is the heart of romanticism. Now, this is again a poem. We'll do this poem. I'm just taking one tiny stanza from here. This is a beautiful poem, 1817, Sleep and Poetry. A thousand handicraftsmen wore the mask of poesy. Poesy means poetry. Ill-fated impious race that blasphemed the bright lyricist to his face and did not know it. No, they went about holding a poor, decrepit standard out, marked with most flimsy mottos and enlarged the name of Juan Polio. Now he's saying that, this is the way in which the older generation, the Augustan age, wrote. He's doing he's condemning everything that you know about poetry. Poetry, the sentences must be arranged in a particular order when you're reading a poem, as opposed to, say, when you're reading a novel. And he's saying that all those are mechanical forms of writing and they are artificial and arbitrary. Any adherence to regularity is an external restraint. And he's saying that, all these people who think that this is what is poetry, they are all silly and they are stupid. It is always an external restraint that has taught this age, the Augustan age, to identify the ways our words are arranged, and you say, because the words are arranged in a different way, therefore that is poetry. And this form of writing is always superimposed on the poet. Poetry, and this is his own definition, he's saying poetry must transcend the particularities of time and space and transport the reader to an imagined realm. And again, the audience, the reader, must feel and be transported to the world that the poet is writing about. And today, this is what is going to be the heart of our discussion. Quintessential characteristic of what is identified as romantic poetry or romanticism, romantic age. This is what René Welle gives as the definition. Again, something that I had learned by heart when I was a student. I always make my student learn by heart. Imagination for the view of poetry, nature for the view of world, and symbol and myth for poetic style. This is what is romanticism, and René Welle gives us the keywords: imagination, nature, symbolism. I'm repeating: imagination, nature, and symbolism. These are the three ways by which we will repeatedly go back to what is romanticism. And René Welle says by now, this is a classic definition of romanticism. Now, why do this, or how does this definition comes in? Anyone knows who was John Locke? Why
John Locke was a political theorist.
Yes, he was a political theorist. Any idea what did he say?
Um, he said Hoblock Rousseau. Locke said that wait a minute. He wrote Leviathan, right?
That is okay. I'll not judge you.
I just choke the word.
I can help you. Okay. Now, suddenly, one of the key things is that romantics say that, we are not going to follow the neoclassical form of writing. We are going to go back away from what is considered to be reason with a capital R. Now, this is a subjective turn, as opposed to the previous form of writing that was the objective turn of writing. This is a subjective turn of writing. And one of the crucial ways by which this form of writing is conceptualized, influenced, is by John Locke's essay. He writes this idea of human understanding. And he says that, the human mind does not have any innate or a priori ideas. Your mind is always tabula rasa, it's a blank sheet. You absorb ideas from the world that you see. So it is the sensations that affect you. The mind first, so in a blackboard, I always write in terms of a flow chart. So first is your mind, you are seeing the world. So it is first, you see the world. You sense, so it is the heat, cold, light, dark, color. You sense. Then next flowchart point is you perceive. So not only are you sensing, but you are making those judgments depending on the discerning power of the mind as to what you are seeing. You perceive the world as per your sensory faculties. Next, you reflect. You decide whether, today's heat is enough for me to wear a t-shirt, or today's heat is enough, I have to wear a sweater? Or is that space I can walk, or is that a dangerous space? So all those little ideas that your mind, you tend to see as, oh, I know it, you don't know it. Locke is saying that no, your mind is always blank. You make those little distinctions, judgments based on your discerning faculty. So first you sense, then you perceive, then you reflect, and eventually you make ideas based on those
Hello, ma'am.
perceptions. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, the video was stuck. It is fine now.
Okay. Okay. You want me to repeat?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So first, you sense. So you go out, you see the color green. You're sitting in a classroom, you see the color green. You sense that that green is the color of a leaf, the color of a grass, the color of the t-shirt of your friend. So first you see, so first is your sensory perceptions. Then you reflect, then with the discerning faculty of your mind, you make little judgments, you generate ideas based on the perceptions. It is these perceptions, the last step in the flowchart, eventually becomes the knowledge. Knowledge is built upon perceptible qualities that give rise to sense impressions. Is this idea clear of John Locke?
Yes, ma'am.
Now,
Yes, ma'am.
Locke's clear. Now, this is important. So, Locke's idea comes in 1690. Then you have a fascinating person again. Another man comes in. He's called David Hartley, and he adds to John Locke's idea, and he says that this is something in 1749. He says that it's just not that you are seeing that green color and deciding, oh, that's the tree, that is different from the color green from the grass, that is different from the color green of, say, that distant shrub. David Hartley says that you are making those distinctions based on the association of ideas. So you are making those judgments based on the ideas that are already accumulated in your mind, and now you can associate clearly, very easily. You just you go into the class and you just don't see human faces, you also give names to their faces. You also distinguish, oh, that is my friend, I don't like her, I don't like him. You associate ideas with those sense impressions. Is this clear? This is 1749. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
what Romanticism does, so now from 1690, 1749, Romanticism was 1798, remember? So Romanticism does is, it puts these two ideas together. John Locke's essay and the ways by which human beings understand, arrive at perceptions and ideas based on what they see, the sense, and David Hartley's argument that external objects create vibrations in the mind. That forms the basis of human ideas. Through a process of association, man arrives at knowledge. And even your big ideas, Romanticism says, like morality, divinity, eventually are ideas that you have formed and framed through this, step by step ideas, starting with the sense perceptions. Now, Locke and Hartley believe that knowledge is derived from experience. This is experience, meaning you go and see, that becomes the first step of knowledge. And an appropriate environment is crucial to the development of benevolence and love. If you do not
Is
see,
the have you switched the slides?
no,
It's Locke Hartley romanticism for now, right?
yes, we are still there.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so romanticism is telling us, Locke and Hartley are telling us, that you don't know what is love, you will not know what is benevolent, you will not know what is anger unless you have seen that. Remember, and the best example of this is, have you read Frankenstein? None of you have read
Yes, ma'am.
Frankenstein.
Yes, ma'am.
So when the monster wakes up, what is the first thing that he sees? What is he says, what is the first thing that he feels?
Mm, he first sees the Dr. Frankenstein, and he was enraged.
No, wrong.
No. First, Dr. Frankenstein was afraid when he sees the
Oh,
monster.
I don't want Frankenstein.
The monster.
Monster.
The monster knows nothing. He was like, what did it say? Um, well, I forgot, right?
I'll help you. The first thing that he says is, I sensed cold, heat, hunger. And that is the reason he says, I run towards the forest, I, pluck berries, and he begins to eat berry. He's thirsty, he goes to the stream, he drinks water. Then there is light that comes to his eyes, and then he says that, I close my eyes. And at night, he says that it is a little easier for me to see, and he walks. He does not know sensations of anger, love, or anything. He's following the Lockeanian idea of development of the mind. I'll help you again. It is only when you remember he's seen that D. Lacey's family through that little keyhole.
Yes, ma'am.
It is there that he learns what is love, what is friendship, what is family. And then you have those three books that,
He read.
yes. So the D. Lacey's family is a subplot that, because Mary Shelley is following this Lockeanian idea of association of ideas and David Hartley's argument. The monster on his own is born a tabula rasa. He is an adult male, but his mind is completely blank. He does not have any of the ideas of anger and hatred or love or benevolence or family or kinship. It is after he sees the De Lacy's family, he learns these emotions, and then he asks the Dr. Frankenstein, that, I want a female monster also. I want to have a family also. Why do you reject me? You are the creator. I ought to be thy son. Why I ought to be thy Adam, but I am your Satan. That is a beautiful quote there. So why do you reject me? Are you following? So the idea of this romantic self that is important also follows a trajectory that comes from John Locke, David Hartley, and you will have then Hobbes and others. So poetry, and it is any art, but poetry I'm just using as an example because in terms of your syllabus, you usually tend to have romantics as poetry. But any form of romantic art, the aesthetic experience that is defined as romanticism is dependent on this habit of association and natural landscape that is vital to the development of the mind. So, mind for a romantic is always a blank a priori. It is the external nature that takes us to individual consciousness. Is this idea clear? This is very, very important because sometimes we tend to forget that, the romantics, we tend to understand that romantics are born as poets. That is not true. In fact, the Coleridge has that biography literary, a very fat book, where he's saying that you are not born as a poet. It is how you train your mind. He defines poetry. We'll go to that discussion later. Poetry as a cognitive function, your mind processes that makes one as a poet and another as a non-poet. Now, this is briefly in terms of a chart, a diagram, you can say what I have been trying to explain you. Now, there is also a little difference from the John Locke's idea of romantic. So, John Locke will say that, the sensory experience of our external world will shape our human nature. But if that were true, then you and your sibling, both of you stay in the same family. Say both of you have the same parents, both of you go to the same kind of schools, but are you both identical? Does that happen ever?
No.
So the romantics say that yes, it is true. Yes, it is true that the external sensory experience shapes our thoughts and ideas. You reflect on the external world. But it is the individual consciousness that creates perception. And that is why individual will always be, whenever you're drawing a flow chart and a diagram, individual will be the first thing in a romantic chart. So individual, the inner feelings is what creates the perception and in turn art. This emphasis on the inner feelings of the artist or the poet or the novelist as a resource for poetry or art rather than the external world becomes the hallmark of romanticism. The subject of reflection, the poetic self, thus occupies the center stage of romanticism. And that is where our modern world has learned that you start your sentences with a capital I am this. So the idea of an individual, the idea of individual becoming the center stage, so much so that what he feels, he thinks, his passion, the ways in which his passions are affected and his feelings are created and affected by the external world, that becomes a microcosm of art. That is what creates the art. And that feeling and passion has to be communicated to the audience. Is this idea clear? Maybe move ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now tell me what you see. This is a very famous painting of Henry Fuseli, Nightmare 1781. Romantics were not just poets, they were also painters. So tell me, what do you see?
Ma'am, it's like someone there is a sleep paralysis demon on the top of the lady, as they say.
Yes, I heard a girl also. Yes, good. There was another person on speaking.
Um,
Okay, so good. There is this woman who is swooning and who is fallen. If she's wearing white, did you notice? You have a figure who is sitting on top of her. It's often termed as incubus. And you have a horse there. Now, is this a little clear? Can you see the red drape, the red cloth? Is it like visible? So there's a contrast of the red cloth, the red drapes that are there as opposed to the white cloth of the woman. Now, if you see the woman, have you ever slept like this? Even when you're dreaming or even when you're sleeping in your deep sleep, does your hands go there and your face falls in? Is that a comfortable position even to sleep and dream?
Ma'am, if I sleep like this, the most probable chance would be I'll be on the floor the next moment.
Yes, and it is an extremely uncomfortable. I cannot imagine sleeping. I must see. I'm old. My body even won't bend like this. But the point is this: this entire composition is not a realistic representation. That is not what Fuseli is interested in. That is boring for Fuseli. In Fuseli's composition, what you see is a woman who is bathed in white light, white cloth, And this white light, if you see, it is stretching across the body of the woman, across her bed, her arms, neck, and head that is hanging at the end of a mattress, clearly in a very uncomfortable position. You have an ape-like person, ape-like figure who is crouching and who is sitting on the chest while a horse with glowing eyes and flared nostrils emerging or emerges from the shadowy background. Now, this painting was first displayed in the Royal Academy in London in 1782. The first reaction was that it shocked, it frightened the visitors. And unlike the other paintings that were there, this painting does not have any moralizing subject. If I ask you what is the moral of the story, Fuseli will say there is no moral of the story. There is no moralizing subject. The entire scene is an imaginary one. It is an invented, a product of Fuseli's imagination. I'm repeatedly using the term imagination. I want you to remember that. And nightmares subject, if you notice, it is also not something that is coming to us from any history book, Bible, any kind of literary text. It is completely a fragment of his imagination. And there are many, many psychoanalytic interpretations of it, so much so that I hope you know who Freud is. Sigmund Freud, in fact, loved this painting. He had a reproduction of this painting on a wall of his apartment in Vienna. There are a lot of psychoanalytical theories about, this is a painting about dreams, about the unconscious. The figure that is sitting on the woman is often described as an incubus, a spirit that is supposed to go and disturb or sometimes violate sleeping women. But think about the painting. That is all theories that you are arriving at through psychoanalysis. But if you look at the painting is not telling us that this is this. The painting is only suggestive. The painting gives us physical forms of frightening shapes. Now, this is important. Look at here. Instead of enlightenment that relied on rationality, the skills of observation, the idea that if you observe you can arrive at a conclusion. Fuseli's nightmare here is showing us the futility of light. Fuseli in fact is saying that look, the light here does not penetrate the inner recesses. The curtains, the tassels in the background, or in fact, even the red drapery that is there is contrasted with the color white of the woman. This is one of the important ideas, visual conceptualization of Romanticism. It suggests, it will not tell you this is what you're going to feel and think. The psychological impulse of this age of artists was to create. It is through reading and reading not just a literary text, but also reading visual art that you will arrive at the philosophical understanding of the age. Did you understand? What I want you to make sense of this, that the philosophical impulse of the artist to create and the interpretation of the act of reading are tied together for the first time in romantic art. That can be visual, that can be poetry, that can be novelist, it can be anything. this psychological impulse becomes a meta value of what constitutes romanticism. This idea that your mind, your inner faculty of imagination is what is creating. And at the same time, as a reader, you have to use your mind to interpret what you're reading and what you're seeing in visual art. Art then has an interpretive act. This is what is called the psychological impulse of romanticism. And it is this that is what is called romanticism, rather than a formal structure of rhetoric, rather than saying that if you write in a mock epic satire, then you are not a romantic, you are an Augustine. Now romantics say that it does not matter, it does not really matter what style or form you're writing, but are you using your mind when you're writing? Are you using enabling it through your inner faculty of imagination? And are you affecting those who are reading or seeing your work of art? If that is true, then what you're doing is romantic. Is this idea clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, poetry then, art also, reflects then a transcendent vision. This vision is always created by a poet. It can be an artist, it can be a novelist, but this vision is always created by the artist. Then theorizing about poetry becomes theory of who is a poet. So when I'm telling you what is romanticism, eventually I will also end up telling about what is or who is a romantic poet. Definition of how Wordsworth writes becomes a way of defining who is Wordsworth. Are you following? It is almost that the artist and his art are married together. Now, one good example of this is the obvious example of this is Wordsworth. You get all kinds of questions. You get a question on Tintern Abbey, you get a question on Westminster Abbey, you get a question on Prelude, you get a question on any. All the answers eventually becomes on Wordsworth. I mean, the poetry is unfortunately is only incidental. The poem is only incidental. Isn't that true? Those of you who are writing your exam answers. So it is almost like, irrespective of what Wordsworth is writing, say 5 poems or different poems, you are using all his poems to arrive at one argument about Wordsworthian art of writing. Now, the other example of this is also Byron. The ways in which you respond to Byron's art is often the ways in which you respond to Byron as a person. Now, this is how Byron is drawn. This is a famous painting of Byron in Albanian dress, 1813. He had never been to this country. This is how Philip Thomas draws him. And this is how he thinks or he perceives Byron to be. Now, anyone, do you know who Byron was? Byron was, Lord Byron. He was defined as a mad and the bad man. He is the romantic hero, the Byronic hero. And his poetic persona and his authorial persona cannot be dissociated from each other. They overlap. Is this idea clear?
Ma'am, in this picture, why is Byron wearing more like of an Indian courtier's dress or like an Indian Maharaja's dress?
This is Albanian dress. This is an Eastern dress. This is the second idea that we'll go. There was also this fascination about the unknown. So the East was unknown at that time. And Byron being Byron, he's writing about Manfred, he's writing about the exotic heroes. So this painter, when he's painting Byron, he puts him on an Albanian dress. This gaze of the West on the East in order to have a sense of a peculiar kind of a spiritual upliftment, something that is not available in the East. In the West, this idea of a gaze becomes very important, where the human You remember we are talking always about consciousness, how your consciousness is affected. Now the romantics say, you go to the east, you go to the orient. The word is orient actually. It is the orient that will go and affect your human consciousness unlike any other way. And therefore, how we respond to Byron's work often becomes how we respond to what Byron was as a person. Now, other example of these two ideas coming in together is Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre, all of you know, right? You know what is the novel Jane Eyre, right? So
Yes,
Jane
ma'am.
Eyre is a very famous Gothic novel. You have this girl who is falling in love with another kind of a Byronic hero, Rochester. Please tell me you know Jane Eyre.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, but that is not what I wanted to talk to you about. What I wanted to talk to you about is this idea of Byronic hero is this hero who is affected by the dark and the gloomy and looking at the orient is not just something that is happening only in the romantic poets, and that is the reason I'm moving from one visual art to another and another. Look carefully in this quote that I have. This is Jane and Rochester conversation. Fearful and ghastly to me, O sir, I never saw a face like it. It was a discolored face, it was savage face. I wish I could forget the roll of his red eyes and the fearful blackened inflation of the lineaments. Any idea when does she say this? Guess, just a guesswork. Any idea when does she say this? I'll help you. This is immediately after she has seen Bertha Mason for the first time. So Bertha Mason is this Jamaican woman who is imprisoned, the first wife of Rochester. She is imprisoned on the attic. And Jane sees her for the first time. She does not know yet that she is the first wife of Rochester. But look into the ways in which she is describing discolored face, savage face, red eyes, almost like an animalistic imagery. Ghosts are usually pale, Jane. This, sir, was purple. The lips were swelled and dark, the brow furrowed, the black eyebrows wildly raised over the bloodshot eyes. Shall I tell you of what it reminded me? Now Rochester says, yes, please, you may. Of the foul German spectre, the vampire. Now, vampire, the first vampire novel is also written by John Polidori on the same night when Frankenstein is written. That is a short story writing competition that these romantics have. Now, look into the imagery in which Jane is describing this entire contrast between what is fearful, what is unknown, and what is she does not know, unknown to her, comes from that gaze of the West on the Orient. Exactly how we just now did, Byron is being dressed in an Albanian dress. So, Gothic, in fact, all Gothic books has an enormous afterlife, takes an enormous afterlife of these ideas where the colonial gaze looks into the West. You have this 1897, you will have Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. You have 1858, you will have Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte's sister, Emily Bronte's fascinating book, Wuthering Heights. But this idea that man, the romantic individual, this is a female, Jane Eyre is a woman, the romantic individual is at the center and looks towards the unknown and then describes it through a vocabulary of the Orient. Now, as a post-colonial critic or a reader, you can critique it, but this is how romantics saw the world, and they described it in that vocabulary. Are you following me?
Yes, ma'am.
So the center of this romantic age is this is a beautiful painting, and whatever I am telling you, you'll get bored seeing me. So instead, see this painting. this is what it is. The romantic individual is right in the center of the drawing. Did you see? And the romantic individual is not looking at us, not really interested in us. Now, this is a very famous painting of John Martin Manfred. Now, the story is this, that Manfred, this is the painting again of the text that Lord Byron wrote, Manfred. Now, Manfred is condemned to eternal life without sleep. So it is, he can live eternally, but he cannot sleep. Now, he is calling upon the witch so that he can find peace. He's so tired. But the witch says, I'll let you sleep, but in return, I want your soul. Now, see this painting. Manfred has not yet dismissed the witch. Martin is drawing a moment, one specific moment where Manfred is calling upon the witch. You have mountains, vast space, vast skies, enormous nature landscape, and human is an insignificant figure there right in the center. But he is in the center. Human is in the center. But human, as opposed to the enormity of the landscape, is an insignificant figure. And the moment that this painting is trying to capture is when Manfred is indecisive. He does not know what I'm going to do. Should I give my soul away? But he's so tired, he wants to sleep. And the painting does not give us exactly how Fusel is won. We don't know what is going to happen. The painting is only suggestive. The painting is asking the reader, go and see, look how the mountains, the skies are there, and as opposed to this vast, enormous nature, look, this little mortal man is there. He's not mortal, sorry. He's an internally immortal man, but he's a sleepless man. Now, this idea of a man and nature, landscape, is very, very important when it comes to understanding romantic. And this is a category that is called the sublime. Sublime is extremely important when it comes to understanding romanticism. Sublime is what affects us. Sublime is something that inspires awe, inspires a sense of terror. Now, remember, Manfred is not there smiling and giggling. He's terrified of this space of landscape. Do you want me to go back to that painting?
No, it's okay, ma'am.
Okay, so he is, what is outside is beautiful. Just see this. What is outside, if you see, it's a blue sky, you have mountains, you have, terrain, the landscape. That is beautiful. But this landscape that is beautiful is not pleasurable to Manfred. It is not something that is inciting pleasure. Our best example is imagine yourself to be in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a sea, and you are right on the cliff on a high mountain. Your mind is affected by that beauty. But at the same time, it is not just beauty where you'll smile and be happy. It is also beauty that is awe-inspiring, terrifying. That enormity of the space is what is creating that experience of sublime. Sublime is not what is harmonious, balanced, beautiful. It has nothing, absolutely nothing with what traditionally or conventionally we understand as, oh, that is such a beautiful place. I want to go there on a holiday. Sublime has everything to do which inspires terror. And at the same time, that sense of terror is also aesthetically alluring. Sublime is terrifying, awe-inspiring, overwhelming. Is this idea clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to see this video. I hope this plays, but I want you to perceive yourself, you insignificant, petty, mortal little boy and girl. I want you to picture yourself, imagine yourself, since now we are in the romantic age, right in the middle of the space that it is. And then tell me at the end of the video, what did you feel? Can we go? It's a very tiny video. So can we do this thought experiment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tell me now.
The place looks
You are in the
very
romantic
serene.
age. So tell me, what did you feel first? So you are telling me, what did you feel?
Looks beautiful, but it really looks, I mean, dangerous too, and harsh,
Hmm.
cold,
Hmm.
but beautiful, to be
Hmm.
honest.
Hmm. But we are following that flow chart, remember? So the first thing that we see is the sense. As you say, sense. What will be your sense? You'll feel cold, horribly cold. You might die in, your bones will be frozen.
Yeah.
And this is
Ma'am, in
just
the
a
sense,
video of the
can we
Alps, and we are talking about an age that did not have electricity, heating, and all that, right? So horrible, horrible cold. Dangerous. One slip and you will die. You will not break your bones, you will die. These
also
are,
lonely, I'll say, because it's like if we go back to the times, it was not that inhabited, so it's like a lone wood or something
yes,
like that.
Yes. And these spaces would be lonely. Even today, these are like nothing. One colony of India would have more population than these entire towns.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
so these are all lonely places. These are places which are cold. So you go there, you will like there, you will click one photo, but after that, you will feel horribly lonely. You will have that sense of, where am I? You will have all kinds of ideas. So I want you to understand that, there is what is called nature. You saw nature. This was nature, this was external reality. But it is not, is this a soothing, comforting nature that we are talking about? Is nature interested in your well being? Does nature really care whether you're alive or dead? No. We are talking about a visual drama that happens in the juxtaposition of the vastness of nature as opposed to the insignificance of man. And in these spaces, remember, you are frail and fragile. Human being is the worst species to be put in this kind of spaces. Any polar bear or any, Arctic dogs would survive far better than you and me. You and I cannot survive in these infinite, vast spaces. They may have the grandeur, they may have, the momentous beauty. What you were saying me that, they are so beautiful, they are so beautiful, they are so beautiful. Yes, yes, they are beautiful. And that is the reason we are not using the word beauty, we are using the word sublime. The insignificance of man is highlighted the moment you put man in this enormous spaces. Is this idea clear?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now go back to now. This is the definition of Burke. Now again, prior to Romantics, we did not have Sublime. We just did not know this category called Sublime. It is Edmund Burke who teaches us for the first time that there's this. We have to make sense of things that are terrifying. You may find, and this is not terrifying like they are dark. They are beautiful things, but at the same time terrifying. And this is something that he writes. The name of the book is Philosophical Inquiry into the Origin of
Ma'am,
Our Ideas of Sublime and Beautiful.
if a person from the Romantic age is like a poet per se, were to be put in a situation like in modern times, for example, he was given a skyscraper or a night city scene where he's seeing the world from the top of it, would we be using the same
Yes,
definition of sublime? Because it's
yes,
dangerous to see
because,
it from the top.
yes. In fact, when Burke is writing, it is only retrospectively we are using the Burkean definition of sublime to talk about poetry. When Burke writes, the first thing that he uses as an example is architectural spaces. He gives the example of cathedrals. Have anyone of you even have you seen Sherlock? If you have seen Sherlock, you will see those massive cathedrals, right? Or you have seen any kind of British series, you would see those massive houses, cathedrals, which are enormously huge and they are always dark. And they have those, conical buildings and they would be
The Gothic
dome-like
architecture,
structures.
right?
Yes, so and churches also, but more than churches, it would be cathedrals, or you have all those estate houses. You Burke is giving the example of architecture. He's saying that when you go into a space like this, think about Jaina. We just not did Jaina. Think about the first thing that she sees when she goes into Rochester's house or Wuthering Heights. The first thing that you see is the house, the name of the house, Wuthering Heights, is scary. It is so enormous that it is scary. You think about even that beautiful houses of those Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, and others. All those houses are enormously huge, enormously scary, and they are something what Burke says that the first impression, your sensory impression, would be of terror, horror, and darkness. In fact, all these writings that you now call as Gothic, Gothic novels, they first come from an architectural house. The name of the house is Strawberry Hill. You can go to YouTube and see the house. Because this person, Horace Walpole, who writes the first Gothic novel, that is The Castle of Otranto, he's saying that he's writing that on his Strawberry Hill. Now, Strawberry Hill again is not an ancient house. This is something that is important. These architectural spaces that Edmund Burke is talking about are all new buildings, but they are made in the image of the older cathedrals, all massive houses. So these are all newer buildings, but they are also buildings that have the power to excite. And
Ma'am,
your first impression of them would be that they are dangerous spaces. Okay, you have any queries? Ask me.
they have too much medieval influence in them, right?
In architecture, yes. Architecture, yes, there is a medievalism that is coming up. But remember, more than medievalism, we just now did, it is also Oriental Eastern influence. So you have all this Ottoman Turks, Ottoman buildings have. Uh, so these are also the Oriental houses and buildings and massive spaces that suddenly is now open to the British. The Britain before did not, prior to this, we did not have the colonial power. So we did not know that you'll have this vast seas. Outside the vast sea, you have an entire unknown that is open to your interpretation and your observation. So this opens up a new way in which you perceive the world. Now, there are certain terms that I want, maybe I'll read this for you for. Whatever is fitted in any sort to excite the ideas of pain and danger, that is to say, whatever is in any sort terrible or is conversant about terrible objects or operates in a manner analogous to terror is a source of the sublime. That is, it is productive of the strongest emotion which the mind is capable of feeling. Underline in your head, the mind is capable of feeling. This is a crucial idea of romanticism. Your mind and the feelings that it excites in the faculty of your imagination, that is what is affected. Burke gives a term to it, and he says that sublime is the highest of all those feelings. And it appears so through obscurity, vastness, infinity. And it comes in gloomy forest. That is the reason you have, I'm repeatedly going back to Frankenstein because it is something that most of you are comfortable with. Frankenstein has those large spaces of forest, large spaces of unknown seas, the Arctic. That entire framing narrative is of Walton going into an expedition to see the unknown Arctic Ocean. These landscapes are wide, expansive, never ending horizon. So Walton does not know what lies beyond there. Frankenstein does not know what lies in the forest. Or towards the later half of this age, you have 1897, you would have Dracula, Count Dracula, and others who are completely, they don't know what lies, what is even dangerous out there. And this is something that is important. It has almost a transformative experience. The sublime is then I'm trying to paraphrase the romantic idea of sublime. The sublime is our strongest of all passion, and it is grounded in terror, something that is terrifying. Yet, this is important, it is not an unpleasant emotion. It is not something that is causing pain, but that sense of danger is giving you delight. That is the reason romantics is also the age of the peak of Gothic writing. You have all kinds of novels that are coming up on monsters. Or Frankenstein is only one of the example, but you have all kinds of books that are written on vampires and or different kinds of penny dreadfuls and monsters. It is almost that you want to read a book, novel, poem. You want to see visual art that overwhelms your faculty of reason, such that you are incapable of making any rational thought. And I'm quoting from Burke: the passion caused by the great and the sublime in nature, when those causes operate most powerfully, is astonishment. And that is something that just now when we did Fuseli's painting or think about Byron's painting, the first thing, that first emotion would be of shock. Astonishment is the state of the soul in which all the motions are suspended with some degree of horror. You're terrified. This heightened state of astonishment, where reason is driven out by an irresistible force, and the mind is so entirely filled with its object that it cannot entertain another. So think yourself that you are put right in the middle of the white snow-capped mountains. You will be so overwhelmed with that enormous space that your mind will not have the space to even think of another object. Your mind would be completely occupied with the ideas of that vastness. The sense of the unknown. Obscurity is an absence of clarity or a mental uncertainty. Now, everyone will be sensible to this who considers how greatly night adds to our dread. And Burke says that, you are usually a little more scared in the night as opposed to the morning. He notes how religion have often used darkness to create fear, vastness, greatness of dimension. And this is true for architecture, for poetry, or when you're reading, you're talking about books that describes the vast spaces. This vastness is a powerful cause of sublime, a mountain, rugged, broken faces, as opposed to what is smooth and polished. And these ideas of sublime, Burke says, takes us closer to the notion of the infinite, where the eye is able to perceive the bounds. You recognize the ends of yourself. You recognize where the boundaries of your individual existence are. You see the object distinctly, and it gives rise to a sense that, I am so insignificant. I am so little. Is this idea clear? Now, one of the quintessential painting of sublime, of the romantic thought is this. This is in fact, if you have a Norton edition of Wordsworth of Frankenstein, this is very commonly as the illustration art. Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, 1818. 1818 is also the time when Frankenstein as a novel is published. 1858 is the time when you have Wuthering Heights. 1897 you have Dracula. So these are all one after the other that is coming up. Now, can anyone please tell me what do you see here, since I just described Sublime? Would you like to try?
Ma'am, firstly, the man is awestruck by the vastness of the scenery he's seeing there,
Yes.
and yet he feel fear. Maybe he feel fear, but still, it's look very attractive to him.
Yes. And is the man looking at you?
Pardon, ma'am?
Is the man looking at you?
No, he's looking at the scenery.
Yes, good. Now, the man is wearing a dark green overcoat, which is not visible to us much clearly, and the boots, and is overlooking a cloudy landscape. He is also, it is a rugged space, it is not a smooth space, so he has to balance himself on a cane. You can see the cane. He's mounted on a dark, rocky surface. The figure is at the center of the drawing, and you have converging planes. It's not a straight line. You have converging landscapes, you have converging lines. The midpoint of all these, can you see that all the lines of all the mountains, of all the, so is this arrow visible if I do this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So
They all
all
converge
these,
into same one area.
yes, this is the center. This is the chest. This man is the center. So you
Or
see
maybe
all the
the or
lines.
it ma'am, could it be the focal point of the person he's looking at?
Yes,
Is it the all lines we are seeing in
all
the
the
picture?
lines. All
Ha,
the lines. See,
all
all the
the
lines here and
because
Well,
here.
like all the lines are matching at the chest as well. So
what
can we see like he's having like a hard time with his heart, like thinking from his like emotions
or
and feelings like that, kind of signifying
Yes,
that.
yes. All
and
the
maybe
lines are
maybe it is
converging
the
on the man.
focal point of his vision or the
Yes,
main focus
yes.
point.
Not of his vision, your vision.
Our vision, right?
You are the viewer, no? He
Okay,
is
okay.
seeing the vastness of the space. He is seeing the beautiful nature, the cloudy nature, and the enormous space. But you, as a viewer, see all the lines of all the mountains. See here, is this, if I move my cursor, this is visible, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
this, all of these, all the mountains and all of these, the focal point converge on the man. As a viewer, then you're drawn to this individual who is at the center of the drawing, not just of the drawing, but also conceptually, he's also at the center of the universe that the Caspar David Friedrich is drawing for us. So, and this image is so popular as the quintessential romantic art, not just art, but quintessential romantic aesthetic. You have the famous Teddy Hilton's book, 1990, Ideology of Aesthetic. This was the cover art. You also have a lot of Frank's work, Winter Journal, music composition. Also, it was painted. It was based on this. Now, if you look into this person, and as a viewer, you are you recognize that the romantic aesthetic is against the Enlightenment logic, rationality, order. You are here, standing here, contemplating the world. In all probability, you are contemplating the ideals of French Revolution, 1789. You are here affected by the emotion, imagination, and sublime. And as an artist, you want to convey that affectation, emotion, imagination, and sublime to the viewer, to the reader, to the audience. And in particular, it is this idea of you, the artist, being affected by an emotion, and in turn, the artist trying to convey that emotion. This is what is the hallmark of what is considered as romanticism. And you exemplify it by placing man as the center. Again, gazing at the vast, the unknown territory in the middle of a canvas. Between the viewer and the foggy distance, you see a man who has turned his back towards you, which means that you don't get to see the man's facial expression. You don't get to see how he is looking at, but it is suggested. It is something that spatially you can make sense of. It is something that you can arrive at by looking into this painting. Now, this same idea is also there in Mary Shelley's work. And that is the reason very often all our universities has that favorite question for your exams. Describe or discuss Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as a romantic novel. Now, it is not a romantic novel because just a little digression. In case I have wrapped up 2 hours, just let me know. Or when I move into 2 hours, let me know. So, when we are looking into Frankenstein is not a romantic novel because it has a man-woman relationship. It is not a romantic novel where there is no, in fact, it is an entirely a trajectory of men. You have only men here. You have only a creation of a man who is completely usurping the role of a woman. It is also called the myth of creation sometimes. But what is at the heart of Frankenstein is this juxtaposition of man and nature. Nature in terms of what? Capital N, nature in terms of the romantic idea, but also man as juxtaposed to the relentless onslaught of nature. So, are you following what I'm trying to explain you? That it is not really a space where you're recognizing man as, he can come and change the world. That is exactly the failure of Frankenstein, the doctor's project, that he cannot, he fails. And he becomes one of the three men. Walton, he fails. He goes to the Arctic, but he cannot cross the ocean, the seas, the cold ice. All of these then return us back to the idea of a sublime where man is insignificant as opposed to the vastness of nature, the enormity of nature, and man only has recourse to then his own mind, his own faculty of imagination, his own faculty of thinking, the thinking selfhood. (1855) then. Now, this is another very famous painting, De la Cruz by the Lion Hunt. Now, if you see this painting, can anyone please tell me what you see in this painting? Tell me and then I'll move ahead. Try.
The
Am I
lion,
yes.
the lioness is hunting, and the lion was being hunted by men.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Ma'am, there is one horse rider that has already been hunted by the lion which is on him, which in turn is being hunted down, like being killed by another rider on top of him.
Yes. Okay. Now I'll ask you a question. Think carefully and then answer. In this painting, is the artist presenting us a specific moment, or is it a long narrative that he is giving? Think about Da Vinci's painting, Leonardo da Vinci's painting, where you have that entire, almost an entire chapter of Bible that is being painted. Is it an entire story that is unfolding here? Or is it a very emotive, one specific moment while the hunt is happening that is painted here?
Is
Is
there
this
death,
action here?
ma'am? Is there death in the right corner?
Is there action here? Is there drama here? Or is there a story here? Choose either.
Ma'am,
Yes,
I
there is
guess
a
there is an
story.
action.
Looks like there is a story.
Hmm?
Because yeah, ma'am, there is an action because even in we example of the Last Supper, which was painted, ma'am, then we particularly see that one action of Judas spilling salt from the table, whereby it depicts his betrayal from his disciples. So I believe that here it must be depicting one particular action, that climax or the important part, not the story per se.
So what you're saying is that it is not actually a story. The Last Supper is a good example because the Last Supper is actually a longer story that you unveil. So you have all the disciples there. and you see each of the face and you can arrive at a narrative, linear narrative of how one is opposed to the other and then the other. Then you have the shape there. And in fact, the table is arranged in a linearity. It is fundamentally a linearity that is presented there. Here, there is no converging point. The nature there, again, see, please note, you have nature that is vast nature, the landscape that is vast, and the moment there, what here we have is action. There is a visual drama, exactly the kind of visual drama that I was trying to show you when we did that little video. You have here animals being attacked and the animals in turn attacking others. We don't know who will. We don't know at all. The painter does not tell us. What we have is the hunters are mercilessly attacking the lions. The lions are showing fearless. The lions are again, attacking the hunters. The lion right in the center of the focus has one of the attackers, and he has pounced, probably killed, and is trying, roaring to go back. His face is turned towards the other on the horseback, trying to scare him off. The one in the background, who is supposed to be a companion, probably, I don't know, is on the back of the horse. The horse here is just about to fall because the horse is being attacked by another lion. It is one moment, one sudden moment that is represented here. Are you following what I'm trying to explain you? So you have here, if you see the action, the hand, the spear, the far background, the contrast is between the nature that is still, the landscape that is still, and the action, the drama that is happening here. The brutality of this scene is contrasted with the horizon. Did you understand? So, in terms of romantic art, it is also important to recognize that we are talking of always about a moment, one specific moment of how you are affected by an enormous emotion. It can be in any kind of emotion, but an enormity of that emotion, you become affected. So, what you have is action. What you have here is man and nature coexisting, not necessarily where nature is going to help you. Nature is not really bothered about you. It is you, the man, who is affected by the external world that you see. You who is sensing the world, your mind is affected.
I'm kind of like a cycle, like the hunter and the hunted, because both of the things are happening simultaneously. Even the man is getting hunted, and
Yes,
the man is hunting as well, and so is the
yes,
lion.
yes. And in fact, that is something unexpected. Maybe the hunter did not even expect that I am going to be the hunted. That it is something that is coming as a shock and astonishment. That it, it is completely. I did not ever expect that the lion is going to come and attack my horse. Another lion is going to come and attack me. Maybe he did not expect, and suddenly he is like trying to save himself, while at the same time he's going trying to go and be a hunter. He's going and killing. Now the artist here is then presenting us a moment of indecisiveness, something that we did in the Manfred paintings also. Your mind is completely indecisive, your mind is occupied by suddenly everything that you are seeing, you are affected by all this revolutionary energy, or everything that is happening in art. It can be visually, it can be in terms of text. But any idea why is this idea of revolutionary energy of art suddenly becoming important? Why is suddenly art has that energy to come and affect you so much that you are now overwhelmed? You are overwhelmed by the mountains, overwhelmed by what you are reading. You have to write, artist has to write in a language, in a vocabulary that will go and affect the audience exactly in the same way how he is affected. Why do you think is this need of revolutionary energy in art? Or why do you think suddenly we have this revolutionary energy of art?
French Revolution and Industrial Revolution.
Okay. And did you arrive at that because we use the term revolution?
No, 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 no. But it was prominent for this time.
Good. In fact, good. So this is also the age of revolution. So while we are doing what is romanticism, we also need to understand why is romantic age such. So this is also the age of revolution. So you have the American Revolution, 1776, that was happening there. So people in, I am primarily today talking about the British Romantic Age. So these were people who knew about the American Revolution, what is happening there. French Revolution, 1789. One other thing is that the British and the French were not friends. Remember that they had wars, they had differing ideas about colonial power. But French
Yes.
Revolution completely changed the ways in which the British perceived themselves. Already by this time, we have something what is you rightly pointed out. We have industrial revolution. From farm laborers, we have now the factory workers. We don't have that idyllic pastoral rural space anymore. We have what is called the urbanization. You have factories, you have dirt, you have people dying. Hundreds and thousands of people were dying because of, bad sanitation. You have the outbreak of diseases, communicable diseases for the first time. You have cholera reaching there for the first time, and you have people dying there. And William Wordsworth actually comes up with this line: bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. So he is also talking about this revolution in a kind of energy that did not happen before. You will not find this kind of revolutionary energy, say, when you're reading Renaissance art, or you're reading about Shakespeare, or you're reading any kind of even Pope Dryden, Marlowe. Nothing, none of that. This is something that is unprecedented. There are few ideas which are important when you just say it is an age of revolution. What exactly do you mean age of revolution? Because remember, we are talking about a romantic man. We are not talking really about romantic woman. We are not talking about the woman and the savage and the children were not equal to man. So, and post-colonial, please, you are Orient. So you are not equal. So when you're talking about revolution, it is not really the idea of how you and I understand at present idea of revolution. It is a very specific idea of revolution that we are talking about in the early half of the 19th century or late 18th century. This is against absolute monarchy. You have the growth of factories and industries, and you have what is called the bourgeois coming up. You already have the fading of the aristocracy. So therefore, what were the feudal wars, what you had the aristocrat debts, so people were against of that. You also have what you can see is the increase in poverty. For the first time, city spaces, a space like London, earlier it was a rural community, now suddenly a city space urbanization happens. And then you have, along with this, simultaneously, you have the new ideas coming up that all are born equal, equality and fraternity and brotherhood, influence of America. But at the same time, with America also comes in colonial power. So
Please, can
it's
you
not just, yes,
slide
did you
before
ask
this?
me?
Yes,
Did
ma'am,
you
the
ask
slide
me?
before.
Huh?
The slide before this.
The slide is not visible to you?
No, ma'am, the slide before the current slide.
You want to see this?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so like French Revolution and the American Revolution, both these things happened at the same time, and I believe around 1773 we also had this America's War of Independence
Yes,
against
yes,
the
yes.
13 colonies. So was it
Yes.
also like kind of a sparking point for the end of the period, literary period as such, like we are talking about?
Yes, yes, because one of the problems with historical chronology is, as students of literature, is that we don't have a starting point and an end point. So even when French Revolution, we say that 1789 it is happening. Does it mean in 1788 the French were happy and they did not have revolution? That's not true, no. In 1788 also things were happening. So what you're saying is absolutely true. So by the time the romantics are writing, or what you consider today as the romantic age, we are doing that retrospectively. We are going back to the age and saying that, oh, this period is romantic age. But these ideas were always in circulation in this time, briefly, roughly around this time. This is the idea where you have the nascent idea of that we are all equal. But at the same time, it is also the time where you have the industrial revolution coming in, where the factory worker is not the same as the factory owner. The bourgeois class is not the same as the aristocrat. And you also have the colonial power coming in. So when you say all are equal, when you say French Revolution coming in, when you say American Revolution coming in, you are also talking about the imperial power coming in. You are also talking about, and this is something that I actually will do now, that there are also this juxtaposition of ideas. So when we did that, this one, the juxtaposition of spaces and moments that we are trying to trace, it is also philosophically juxtaposition of ideas that we are trying to trace. Because philosophically, very often we tend to believe that, it is a neat categorization. American Revolution happened, French Revolution happened, Wordsworth begins to write lyrical ballads, and then all is beautiful. That is not true. When Wordsworth is writing, or when romantics are writing, this is also the time when different kinds of radical writing were coming up. Who is keeping a tab on the time?
Ma'am, it's 12:50.
Huh?
12:53.
No, in the sense that how much time do I have? Can I go into this idea of revolution a little more? How much time do I have?
Ma'am, you can take 10 minutes.
Okay, so we'll go into this idea of revolution and then we'll pause. Is that fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when we are talking about the influence of America, the colonial and colonial power at the same time, you also have to understand that it is not a neat categorization of, French Revolution coming in and telling us that all of us now are brothers. It's absolutely nonsense. So the way I remember is French Revolution happens, or this revolution, our age of revolution, we break it up into two phases. The first phase is the the jubilant phase, the success, 1789 to 1793. Historically, you have the Bastille, that is storming of the Bastille, you have the elimination of aristocrats, you have the adoption of the rights of man, you have execution of the king, and you have this very famous line, liberty, equality, and fraternity, the promise of a brighter day, the promise of regenerated man and regenerated earth. And these ideas affect the first generation. So you would have Wordsworth and Coleridge writing about the ways in which French Revolution is absolutely beautiful. You would have ideas that art needs to change, art has the potential to change. You would have Shelley storming and writing about man is Prometheus, the modern man is Prometheus, because the modern man has the capacity, has the potential to change the world. Then you would have Shelley saying that, oh, it is not the man of science, it is poets who are the legislators of the world. So this is the first phase. The second phase is by the time you move slowly from 1793 to towards somewhere, sorry, it is 1790 to 1793. It's a typo error. So you have what is the violent and turbulent age. This is when suddenly you realize the artists, the painters, the philosophers of this age, and the poets, they realize that when you say all men are equal, are we really talking about all men? When you say idea of justice, suddenly you see that all the opponents are executed. Then you have the Napoleon who goes on rampant war. Suddenly you see that everything that you believe to be the ideals of revolution just don't exist the moment it translates into the lived experience. So, from buoyancy and expectation, there is a deep sense of despair and disillusionment. And this idea of disillusion actually comes in beautifully in these two books. If you have a time, go and read it. You know, Burke's Reflection on the Revolution. This is exactly 1790, and Godwin 1793. That is the reason I said you have a typo error. It should be 1790, 1793. These two are the radicals. They are called the radicals because they say they recognize the failure of the revolution. They recognize for the first time that what you think as political justice is not for all. Then you have also Godwin's wife talking about, the vindication of rights of women. Suddenly you realize that, oh, when you're saying the romantic man, you literally mean the man. Because you are saying that, and this is something that Kant says, that the savage, the woman, the children do not have the faculty of reason like man. Again, what kind of man? You are talking about a capital M man, which is a white, propertied man. So you have all those novels coming up suddenly of Jane Austen and others, where you would have, in Mansfield Park, the protagonist Edmund. He is the second son, so he does not inherit property. So we are not talking about any man who is a romantic man, any man who becomes the precipitate of the revolutionary zeal. It is a propertied white man, and exactly what you were pointing out, that this is something that we have to keep in mind. Now, sometimes this is something that happens in our discussions, is that we talk about the context and we forget the text. So I want you to place these two together. 1789, when French Revolution is happening inside your head, that is also the time when Blake's Song of Innocence is happening. So, Song of Innocence is when you have this jubilant, this sense that, oh, now things are going to change because man has the potential of innocent. Man is made into the image of a baby, the innocent face. By the time you move from 1791, 92, slowly skepticism comes in. You have the rights of man, Thomas Paine, right? 1792, you have restrictions on freedom of press. Suddenly, not everyone is allowed to write what they feel. Not everyone is allowed to write what they think. So Mary Wollstonecraft was the wife of William Godwin and the mother of Mary Shelley. She writes this book about how women have never been able to write because they were never able to study. Education, the right for education, vindication of the rights of women. And is in this context you suddenly have 1798 Wordsworth's preface. Now, just before you think that world is so beautiful in 1798 lyrical ballad, remember 1798 is also the time when you have the first major resistance against the British colonial power. And in our own country, I'm giving the example of India deliberately, Tipu Sultan is killed. So all these things are happening together simultaneously. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so would you like to take a little break before we move ahead?
Sure.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll just pause the video here, and then would we meet, say, after 10 minutes? Is that fine?
Fine, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 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 okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.